Welcome back to the Red Path. Today, we're going to talk about heavy support options for the World Eaters. So, you want some Dakka, huh? Well, alright, I reckon we can take care of that. Before I get onto the big guns, however, I want to make a couple of quick shout-outs. First, go check out Crafted Minis on Instagram. Whilst they haven't posted anything in a hot minute, there's a really cool red Butcher Terminator featured here, hint hint, and some really cool paint jobs. Go give them a look and a heart react. Next, well, okay, not a shout-out, but a bit of self-promotion, I guess. I'll give you the too long didn't read it here and go into some detail at the end of the video. That way, you can just listen to this intro for 5 more seconds before the content starts. So, I'm going to go live with Patreon and Ko-Fi. Done. Alright, with that out of the way, let's pick a grid coordinate and blow some shit up. The big guns. Well, alright, slightly larger than average guns. So, I asked Discord members to vote for their top 3 shooter units from the Chaos Codex and said I'd make a video about the best ways to use them. Like a dumbass, I included a unit that I've already done a unit analysis video on, and that unit, the Hellbrute, came in 3rd place. Typical. So yeah, I'm not going to feature the Brute prominently in this video, but I will give it a brief summary. But we're not going into depth. I will be covering Havocs, who came first with 25 votes, Contemptor dreadnoughts, who were second with 15, and Obliterators came in 4th with 12 votes. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the units specifically, we need to look at some general assumptions that need to be made for any tactical applications and efficiencies to be optimised. Khan is going to be considered to be within 1 inch of these units when shooting, offering full rerolls to failed hits. We will not be considering psychic powers. I know they really help some of these units out a lot, but mixing psychic stuff in, it's just not my jam. Where appropriate, I'll include data for any other relevant buffs, apostles' prayers, stratagems, etc. So let's kick off with the Hellbrutes and get them out of the way. Check out this video for a more intensive look, but ultimately, I think these are going to be a very solid choice for World Eaters. The native buffs they look almost certain to receive, -1 to incoming damage and an improved craze rule, potential stratagem changes as well. After making the video I just linked to, I've changed my mind weapons wise. I think the multi-melter is a much better choice for Hellbrutes. Its shorter range is easily mitigated by the higher damage output, and the fact that as a World Eater you want the Brute charging up the centre field. I think that at the moment either a Fist or Scourge are reliable options, just depends on your particular meta. Overall, the Hellbrute is a great model, it looks to be getting great rules and just fits so damn perfectly in a World Eaters list. Alright, let's look at the 3rd place suggestion. Obliterators. I absolutely love this unit. I loved them before they had their rules update midway through 8th, and I love them more now. They do suffer from some inefficiency in a pure World Eaters list, but they still have a lot going for them. This is due to them being unable to take Slaanesh as their mark of chaos, and therefore no access to Endless Cacophony. But let's start off by looking at their stats. 4 inches of movement with 3+ weapon and ballistic skills, strength and toughness of 5, 4 wounds a model, 3 attacks base, leadership 8, and a 2-up 5-up. With a max squad size of 3, they are essentially immune to morale without significant debuffs affecting them. Losing 2 and rolling a 6 doesn't break the final Obliterator. They gain Death to the False Emperor, for now at least, the ability to deep strike from turn 2, and have flesh metal guns. But essentially, outside of opponent modifiers, they will, per model, have 6 autocannon shots minimum, with strength 7 -1 AP and damage 1. With the random roll you are likely to get strength 8 -2 AP and damage 2, but this is of course not entirely reliable. However, due to the order of operations, you roll for their stats when you select them to shoot with. Target selection comes next, so you can at least figure out their firepower before selecting a target, which does mitigate the random element somewhat. Pertinent keywords are Demon and Infantry. Demon is more appropriate in other legions who can use Sorcerers and Masters of Possession for psychic buffs, but it does allow them to benefit from the greater possessed, for example. Infantry is important, however, as it allows obliterators the ability to take advantage of breachable terrain, which does increase their mobility somewhat, and does also allow them to be benefited by the apoplectic frenzy if you were to choose to begin them on the table. Firepower wise, and we'll look at a squad of 3 at 315 points, they are 105 points a model, well, let's crunch some numbers. Putting out 18 shots, and this is our biggest inefficiency, as I said previously, we're locked to Khorne and we can never benefit from endless cacophony. But nevertheless, 18 shots is pretty solid Dakka, whether 18 autocannons or 18 average las cannons at strength 9, minus 3 AP and damage 3, there is tremendous killing to be achieved with these models. Sitting alongside Khan for full rerolls to failed hits and assuming no negative modifiers, 18 shots at ballistic skill 3 will provide 16 hits. Depending on target efficiency, you're causing some serious pain here. At the worst profile, the autocannon, against marine equivalent units, you're wounding on 3s, so that's 10 to 11 wounds at -1, meaning they will save 5 or so, and you'll do 5 unsafe wounds, killing about 2 marines. But unless you're trying to finish a squad off or weaken it for a charge, your autocannon profile, again this is the worst case scenario, is better aimed at chaff units like Guard or other T3 units with poor saves. Aim to wound units on 3s or 2s with this profile, and further prioritise those with single wounds and or low native armour saves, 5s or 6s. This will net you the best return of investment on this profile. If we upgrade to the average micro melter profile, strength 8, minus 2 AP or damage 2, we are much more tuned for killing marines now. We'll wound them on 2s, giving them only a 33% survival rate, and we'll pop one with each wound that passes through. At this profile, the 16 hits will translate into 13 wounds, achieving about 8 or 9 shots past the armour, killing 8 or 9 marines. This is much more efficient. If you lock out and get the top profile, strength 9, minus 3 AP, damage 3, you really want to be focusing on anything you're otherwise ill-equipped to deal with. Toughness 8 models like Knights or Leman Russes or even Primarchs. The combination of volume with strength, AP and damage will tear anything apart. Let's take a Leman Russ, a T8 tank with a 3-up save and 12 wounds. Again, 16 hits with Khan nearby, wounding 10-11 times, stripping armour to 6+, gives them 2 saves at best, letting around 8 completed shots at 3 damage a pop, putting 24 damage through. You could happily target 2 Leman Russes and likely kill 1 and significantly wound a second, as you have to split the shots 12 and 6. So that's the killing power in the shooting phase. It's obviously more efficient the better your roll, but it's no slouch at any point. But what else can a World Eater benefit from with Obliterators? Well, they're no slouch in combat either. They've got a weapon skill of 3, strength 5, AP -1 and damage D3 with 3 attacks per model, which on the charge becomes 5 per model, so that's 15 attacks for a squad of 3. That's really pretty solid. Well equipped to deal with marines again, not ideal, but they can certainly finish off a squad if they can make the charge. As infantry, they benefit from breachable, so can charge through any terrain with that trait, and depending on deployment and your choice whether to reserve them or not, they could have 9 inches of pre-game move, 4 inches further up the field in the movement phase, and depending on your opponent's movement and your shooting kills, be within a solid charge range for turn 1. Regardless, few enemies will genuinely want to face them in battle. Now, as mentioned, they do suffer a little from not being Slanesh, which is unfortunate, but they can benefit from some clutch World Eater stratagems, with the pre-game moving, additional AP in the fight phase, a 6-inch consolidate move for better positioning, or even a second round of combat with Fury of Khorne. I really think I need to try Obliterators out again sometime. I used to run 3 squads of 3 before the rules changed, but then sold most of them off and kept only 2. Depending on how our codex goes, it may be time to grab a few of these. Alright, next up, let's look at the Contemptor Dreadnought. The Contemptor has taken a bit of a nerf from its old rules, but is still a unit worth considering. It does come at a little more of a premium now, costing 1 CP for the Martial Legacy rule, but I don't generally see this as too much of an issue in 9th, with our natural CP generation every turn. I play World Eaters as CP hungry, pre and early game, so if I write a list that needs a Contemptor, well then I factor that in. With similar stats to the Hellbrute, the Contemptor rocks 8 inches of movement, weapon and ballistic skill 3 up, strength and toughness 7, 9 wounds, 4 attacks base, and a 3 up, 5 up save characteristic. It gains the Relentless Hatred ability, reducing incoming damage by 1, which is absolutely solid, and really nice in the current meta. Keywords wise, it possesses core and vehicle, so can shoot into combat at a penalty and benefit from aura effects, at least we have to assume so anyway. The main use of a Contemptor is the sheer variety of weapon options it can be equipped with. If you magnetise your model, which is relatively simple due to the size and shape of the components, the only prohibition to this is your willingness to purchase different options. Essentially, there's 3 core ways to run a Contemptor: all range, mixed, or all combat. Let's start with the combat variant. Choosing between the stock fist or the chain fist is really a matter of personal choice. The chain fist costs 5 points, whereas the close combat weapon is free. At current time, there is no benefit to paying for 2 chain fists, as the ability to gain attacks by dual wielding melee is missing. This is a bit of a shame, as it makes running 2 combat weapons utterly pointless when the plasma cannon is also free, so you may as well take that with the melee fist of choice. So, given running dual melee is currently pointless other than the rule of cool, let's move on to the mixed variant. For pure cheapness, if you have 140 points spare and want a Contemptor in your list, then yep, the close combat fist and plasma cannon variant is your go-to. The chain fist upgrade increases AP from -3 to -4, damage from 3 to 2d3, and is a 6 flat on vehicles. This is actually a pretty decent upgrade, especially if you're in a vehicle heavy meta. The plasma cannon ain't bad for free, with d3 plasma shots with an extra point of damage, but if we're going to look for some better shooting, let's see what we've got. In the cheap range, we have the C-beam cannon and twin Volkite culverin, both at 5 points. The C-beamer is better at long range, so would favour particular missions or larger battlefields, and the Volkite is solid Dakka for clearing 2-wound models, for example Marines. 8 shots with Khan for rerolls give 7 solid hits, which would give 5 wounds and probably kill 2 Marines after saves. The lack of AP really hurts the Volkite in my opinion, but the chance for some mortal wounds bumps it back up a little bit. At 5 points it's not terrible, but it's a weird disparity between damage 2 and 0 AP. Sure, it's pretty good against Marines with storm shields, but otherwise it's kind of losing efficiency. Going on to the mid-cost weapons, we have the Kera's Pattern Assault Cannon, Multi-Melter, Twin Autocannon and Twin Heavy Bolter. The Kera's Heavy Bolter and Autocannon all favour infantry targets, with both cannons having a little duality against vehicles with strength 7. The Kera's focuses on volume over damage, and the Autocannon sacrifices 2 shots but bumps its damage up to 2. The Heavy Bolter sits somewhere between the two, with lower strength but AP 1, 2 damage and 6 shots. Each of these can fill a good role, but I'd probably go for the Kera's myself. The duality means it will be more useful more of the time. Sure, it won't pop a Marine in a single hit, but nor is it overkilling Guardsman equivalents, and is more reliable against tougher enemies. It's also 5 points cheaper than the Twin Heavy Bolter and Autocannon. Next we have the Multi-Melter, clocking in at 10 points as well and doing what any good melter should do in 9th edition. Upgraded to 2 shots and d6 plus 2 damage within 12 inches, for me personally this is the ranged weapon of choice for a World Eater's Dreadnought. Whilst all our playstyles will differ, I'm heavily leaning towards multi-purpose units, making sure almost everything I have on the table can harm more or less anything. Combining a multi-melter with a close combat chain fist puts this Contemptor up to 155 points, but with average dice rolls it can put out some serious hurt. 2 or 3 of these with Khan in tow will get pretty accurate melter damage and can withstand some decent firepower at T7, 9 wounds, -1 to incoming damage, and a 3 up 5 up. Finally, the premium version of the Contemptor is the dual twin las cannon. This saw a lot of play at the end of 8th edition in Chaos lists, but I didn't really care for it. I'm still not sold on the cost of d6 damage weaponry, which is why I love the melters this edition. It's impossible to rely on big output from this, and at 25 points for only 2 shots, or 50 points for 4 shots, I don't see the variables lining up often enough to justify the points cost. But that's just my opinion. If you really want firepower from a Contemptor, I'd probably recommend dual Kera's. It balances the most versatility from all the weapons, and whilst I prefer the multi-melter, that really works a little better when paired with a combat weapon to increase the duality. For secondary weapons, if you're running combat weapons, the combi bolters are free and definitely worth considering, but I really like the plasma and graviton options. Heavy flamers are heavy flamers, they're fine but swingy. The graviton, however, is really good at killing marines, and definitely worth considering. As a quick note on the Cyclone missile launcher, at 25 points I think you pay too much for what you get. It does offer solid options, but unless you really can't find anywhere else to spend the points, I'd personally avoid it. Tactically, the Contemptor is best used in my opinion as a mid-range support option, not a backfield heavy support. Its affinity for being competent in both shooting and combat means it should be able to maximise efficiency throughout the duration of the game, and will be useful as long as it can be kept alive. Whilst they do not currently gain any Legion traits, this will likely change with the Codex, as they lost the Hellbrute keyword, they are solid and dependable. My personal recommendation is to fit a Chain Fist, Multi-Melter and a Graviton Blaster and go kill everything possible. And finally we look at the Havocs. I absolutely love Havocs. They can provide game-changing firepower and have received some very significant improvements with their last rules overhaul. With the normal Marine stat line except toughness 5 and the ability to ignore the penalty for moving and shooting heavy weapons, we all know what we can expect from Chaos Marines. To start with, drop the special weapons on the champion. In all but fluffy games, you're going to be plucking this model out as the first casualty, in all but pretty much the rarest situations at least. Don't waste the points, really. But at 17 points for the base models, you want to ensure you're getting the most bang for your buck here. So once again, let's look at the weapon options per cost bracket. Let me preface by saying I always specialise my Havoc squads. Every model I have has the same heavy weapon. This is neither better or worse than having different options, it just fits my playstyle. I know I can rely on this unit to be able to put some hurt into whatever target they're going for. Now, we should all be fairly familiar with the options available, but starting with the cheaper options, we have autocannons at Heavy 2, Strength 7, -1 AP, Damage 2 at 48 inches, and Heavy Bolters, Heavy 3, Strength 5, -1, Damage 2 with 36 inch range. The trade-off here is really the strength versus the number of shots. I don't see the range being a big variable, but I guess with 25% more reach, the autocannon does have that in its favour, especially in the early game. The bolters will tend to be more efficient when paired with rerolls from Khan, just because volume is a better beneficiary of that sort of multiplier. But the +2 strength of the autocannon adds to the target versatility. Devastating against T3 units and solid against light vehicles, and also better against the increasingly common T5 stat line. I think the autocannon squeaks past in this category just by being able to be more useful in more situations. The heavy bolter is by no means a bad option, but just doesn't quite meet the lethality of an autocannon in my opinion, even with the extra shot. Of the mid-tier price weapons, we have the las cannon and missile launcher, both coming in at 15 points, which for me makes it a fairly easy choice. The missile launcher can almost do the job of the las cannon with its crack profile, and also does the job of some very effective crowd control with frag missiles. The las cannon, while strength 9 and -3 AP, is only going to be better against very specific units, generally toughness 8 models, and is all but wasted against any other option. A canny opponent can fairly easily play to this weakness of a las cannon by not making primary targets easy to locate, and instead moving hordes through firing lanes relatively easily. Against missile launchers, however, any model is at risk, which will help them think a little harder about their choices. Here, I quite clearly prefer the missile launcher, even if it loses out against particularly high toughness units. And finally, the Reaper chain cannons. Thankfully, there is now reason to take the heavy bolter instead of the Reaper, as when they were almost identical bar range, the Reaper was an auto pick. Now, not so much. Still great for putting out absolutely insane Dakka, and never underestimate the effectiveness of buckets of dice. Ask any Orc or Guard player. However, at a bizarre cost of 20 points per Reaper, even at 8 shots, I feel this is too expensive. It should, in my opinion, sit right there with the las cannon and missile launcher as the anti-infantry option of the upper tier. Ultimately, it's hard to go wrong with Havoc equipment. I personally think discount autocannons or missile launchers are the way to go. Hell, 2 of each in a squad is pretty damn solid, even if I don't normally do that. It offers good Dakka and solid anti-tank options. Combined with Khan, Veterans of the Long War, and potentially a prayer from an Apostle for +1 to hit, you can get some serious damage output from a squad of these. As they are infantry, they have a nice small footprint that can hide fairly easily, they're pretty mobile, especially being potential targets of apoplectic frenzy, and they are not anything to scoff at in combat, especially as World Eaters, and especially when facing lower tier enemies. 16 attacks on the charge isn't bad at all, and depending on the champion's melee weapon, may be able to deal with some decent threats. Alright, so that pretty much concludes the nuts and bolts of these three units. They all have a role in a World Eaters list, and I honestly can't say which is better than the other. If you're looking for some anti-tank options, I think the Contemptor with Multi-Melter and Chain Fist is the best choice here. Neither the Havocs or Obliterators have access to as reliable anti-tank weaponry, even though they can definitely pull it off in a pinch. The duality of the weapons options means the Contemptor can be active in both the shooting and the fight phase with tremendous effect. If you want something that's going to sit on an objective and murder every horde that comes within spitting distance, then Obliterators are the choice for you. Whilst they absolutely can deal with larger enemies when they roll hot, they will always be able to put out significant Dakka against low tier models. They require perhaps the most finesse in using, making sure your target priority and positioning is on point, but they can really act as one of those game swinging units when played effectively. The Havocs are a solid choice in any list, quite frankly. I'd definitely recommend autocannons and missile launchers for weapon choices, and then they can happily sit in cover somewhere on a backfield objective, providing plink damage where necessary, or covering a fire lane to protect a flank. Whilst they are likely to get promoted to 2 wounds, it may be some time before that happens, so they are still fairly vulnerable, even at T5. The way you use any of these units will be determined by the rest of your list, and quite frankly, there's too many variables to consider to give proper advice for strategy. But, as I've talked about ad nauseum, World Eaters right now are a counter-offensive army that relies on capitalising on the centre field. Whether Berserkers, Raptors or Red Butchers, our popular units rely on taking and capturing objectives through ultraviolence, not shenanigans. Whilst using terrain and other resources like reserves and transports is integral to successfully using Berserkers, they often need something else to support them. Having a threat in the backfield with Havocs, or a lumbering machine of death charging straight down the centre, can cause problems for an opponent. Whilst it may be better for them to pop the relatively weak Rhino containing 10 Berserkers, they see the Contemptor barreling toward their expensive hero in the middle of the table, and they may need to commit firepower to bring it down, instead of neutralising the squishier Rhino and Berserkers. Managing your resources to most effectively score points and or neutralise your opponent's effectiveness is critical to using a more nuanced army like the World Eaters. Yes, competitive success with World Eaters is nuanced, believe it or not. Making sure Khan or a Lord are nearby to offer rerolls, remembering the right prayer at the start of the round, using command points wisely on the right stratagems, all these things mount up to swing momentum in your favour if acted on deliberately and effectively. Using them to enhance ranged firepower from any of the units discussed here will only improve your ability to win games. And whilst the shooting phase is unlikely to be the catalyst for a point swing for a World Eaters list, if it can chip half a Marine squad away or reduce an enemy tank to half effectiveness, these things alone can buy time and space for our critical melee units to make combat and do what we need them to do. Okay, that almost wraps it up for today, folks. One final thing. Patreon and Ko-Fi. I've been debating this for a while, and I've had several discussions with folks about the whole monetization thing. I'm avoiding ads because I hate them, and don't want to subject all of you to them. I don't want to paywall content with YouTube membership, though I am going to look into it a little deeper when it does become an option, just to see if there's anything else I can use it for. I've talked elsewhere about the expenses of running a YouTube channel, especially when you're starting from scratch, so I'm not going to dive into that here. But what I do know is that I want to continue to improve the channel and be able to give more stuff away. But those things necessarily cost money. That's just the way of the world. So there's 3 ways to support the channel: Ko-Fi, Patreon, and also Amazon affiliates. Let me break them down for you. Ko-Fi is a website where a supporter can donate pretty much any amount of money they wish as a one-time donation. I've set it to $1, which is the lowest number I could set. I've listed a goal of $150 there because I really need to buy a new chair, and they're not as cheap as you'd expect, unfortunately. The second option is Patreon, which I'm sure you're all at least passingly familiar with. I've created 4 tiers, well 3 really with a bonus one. The first is $1 a month as a cultist, and this gives you access to a private Discord for patrons only, and also the ability to vote on occasional polls that I will post there privately, which will be more specific than the general polls. Honestly, this tier is mostly for those who can afford a small amount of passive support and don't mind throwing $1 away at me each month. The second tier is $5 a month, and that's the Berserker tier. This one includes the same Discord benefit, but you'll also have the ability to directly influence content on the channel by giving suggestions, criticisms, ideas and so on, whether as feedback or as an idea originator. The top tier is $10 a month and you will be the chosen of Khorne. It has the same benefits as the other tiers, but you also get a one-time list review. You give me a World Eaters list, well, a majority World Eaters list at least, and I'll review it in a video for you, which will be published. In addition, you'll be invited to join me in Let's Play events on occasion. I'm going to try and get a few 40k related games to stream, Dawn of War, Tabletop Simulator being obvious ones, but the new Darktide game when it drops will also be a good option I think. The final tier is the Eightfold and is $8.88 a month. It is exactly the same as the Chosen of Khorne tier except $1.12 a month cheaper, but there's only 8 of these available. So the first 8 folks to sign up for them get all the benefits at a reduced price. Let me caveat this right now. If sometime down the line the channel blows up, I may occasionally expand this group if I need a way to promote Patreon, but in general it will be an exclusive group. I just reserve the right to help the channel as best I see fit. In addition, I still have my Amazon affiliate links below and in the Discord channel. Depending on the success of these, I believe after a month or so I can get a more general link that just lets you click and search Amazon through it. But for now, I have to use individual links for each product. But if you want to buy some 40k stuff off Amazon, give me a shout and I can get you an affiliate link. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does support the channel. So if you're interested in supporting the channel, please consider any of these methods. If you have any questions, please ask. I'm happy to answer to the best of my ability and will provide as much transparency as I can. Alright, that wraps it up for today folks. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider hitting that thumbs up button. If you didn't, well, hit the thumbs down. Either way, please consider subscribing, and as ever, stay healthy, stay safe, and kill, maim, burn.